Hey, welcome back to another lecture series video. What really started the Viking Age? Well, it's not what you think, and it's certainly not what you learned in school. So in this video, I'll use this book by a famous Norwegian author whom I have much respect for, and I'll tell you all about it starting any second now. First, take a look at I got my first merchandise for the Viking stories. It says Viking here. And towards the end of the video, I'll do a giveaway, my first giveaway. So if you want to stick around, we can do that after we go on to today's topic. I'll share my screen here as I always do, and let's get right to it. So what started the Viking Age? Even in Norway, there is this kids in school, they learn that in the year 793, a bunch of crazy Vikings went to a monastery in England and started attacking and being horrible and taking a lot of loot and treasure back home. And that sort of sparked the whole thing. Well, it's not that. It's all wrong. And I'll agree, this is a topic that's a tad controversial. And I am one of those historians, along with Torgrim Titlestad, as you'll see here on the top right in this book, who have for a long time been arguing for a much more wider perspective on viewing the Viking Age. And that's concerning how we look at the Vikings in the start of the Viking Age. The people in Scandinavia, did they know about what went on outside of Scandinavia? And of course they did. And I'll explain it now. You'll see it now. So the causes of the Viking Age, was it robbery or was it really self-defense? And as you can see from the book here, this is sort of depiction from the first raiders at the Lindisfarne. Thing is, there had been Vikings for decades before. In the Baltics, we know of Viking raids going several decades back before this. And also both in Ireland and England, there were Viking ships. Thing is, with Lindisfarne, there has been this recording of how the Vikings acted, written by the monks. And this has stuck for some reason so hard in people's minds. And as you can see here from the book, Lindisfarne as an expression of this island's exceptional position of Christendom, one of the most important holy sites in the island of Britain. So was there a reason why these Vikings would attack this particular place? When in order to know more about this, we need to know this guy, Charlemagne, as he has been called. He was king of the Franks, King Charles the Great, and he became emperor. He made himself emperor and created the Carolingian Empire, which you can see here. It's called in the book the Frankish Empire, and it expanded so tremendously, as I will show now, how you can see how this threatened the people of Scandinavia in a very particular manner. So, new trading routes in the 6th to 8th centuries. We got to know a little bit up front on what happened in the centuries before. Because we had, there is a reason why the rise of the Frankish power became so great. So I'll take it a little bit back now, talking about the Germanic tribes, because the Franks, of course, were a Germanic tribes, just like the Goths and the Vandals and many others, Alemanni and Germani also was one of those. It's been called the Germanic tribes. I prefer to call it the tribes that came out of Scandinavia, because the word Germanic doesn't go that far back. But here, as you can see on the map here from Wikipedia, the expansion of the Germanic tribes in the early Iron Age. You can see they all came out of Scandinavia, going in all different directions. And this became, about 1100 years ago, if you only look at languages, the spread of the Germanic languages, even in the Rus Vikings main areas, and also down on Crimea with the Crimean Goths. So that's somewhat good to know. And also before this period, the Merovingian time, as we call it in Norway, there was a lot of trade coming out of Scandinavia. Even back into the Bronze Age, there was so much that Scandinavia had to trade. And especially in the centuries before, the Viking Age, when Scandinavia had so much iron to trade, and amber from all around the Baltic, being traded for thousands of years, going back. Down here, you could see how trading goods were traded, going down into the Baltic and connecting to the Amber Road, as it was called. It's been called, to trade with the Romans and the Roman Empire. And we'll get back to the Roman Empire here. But before that, there's something that happened that changed the whole way trade worked in the centuries before the Viking Age. Because first we had something called the Thimble Winter. I put up a photo here just to show a little bit of how it could have been imagined by this artist. There was a 3-year-long winter that was sparked by some volcanic eruptions that lasted from the year 536 to 539. But because of this long winter and the implications, there was a 125-year mini ice age. And I'll put links down below this video, by the way, so you can click on this and read for yourselves if you would like to. And there was also a plague. It's called the Justinian Plague. It occurred just a few years after, in the year 541. And we got to remember on this great plague that killed so many, 40 to 50% of populations in Europe, in many areas. And it was recurrent. It lasted all the way up to about the year 750. So there you have it with the 6th and the 7th centuries. Everything changed, and the trade that used to go down the Baltic and through Europe in this way, when the market was in the Roman Empire, it disappeared, and there was new trade routes coming down through the Frisians, and it was called the Merovingian times because in archaeology of the trade that has sort of labeled everything there as Merovingian. And we know that many of the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes traveled from present-day southern Denmark, northern Germany, and Jutland to England. That they became what is known as the Anglo-Saxons, and they were very closely related to the Frankish Empire, as we shall see. Now look at this. Here you can see the map of the Frankish territory. Here the Franks were established here in Neustria in the 5th century. And then in these devastating 6th and 7th centuries, you had the spread of Islam coming up through present-day Spain and Portugal. It was stopped by these Franks in Tours, down in present-day southern France. And you can see especially when the conquests of Charlemagne started, the expansion of the Frankish Empire, it became known as, in the year 800. And the tributaries also here, huge area all around Europe. So this is very similar to the Roman Empire, and it's only 3 centuries later. And of course, they had a long and lasting memory, all these Germanic tribes. Now everything was gathered into one big empire again, and that's a big theme. That's something important to know throughout this talk. And of course, all these Germanic tribes, these groups, would remember back to when they defeated the Romans, and up here in Scandinavia, where the entrance to Scandinavia is through Denmark, we got to know that something happened, especially in the city of Verden, which threatened the Danish, not only the Danish. This is due to the Saxon wars. As you can see here, 777 and to 797, there were these Saxon wars with great implications. It was sword christening that Charlemagne did, meaning sword christening, you would either accept subjugation and convert to Christianity, or you would die by the sword. And in the year 800, Charlemagne, he was actually even I'll turn off the German sound here now. Sorry about that. This is from the Aachen Cathedral, which still stands today. People can go down there and view it. I haven't done it myself yet. I'm looking very much forward to it. Charlemagne is still buried there, and he was crowned emperor by the Pope in the year 800. He died in 814. And what we gotta know is that this man and his empire, it didn't last long. and he was split into three between his three grandsons, and that's what became France, Italy, and Germany. And I'll show you this here now. So here you can see in the year 843, the kingdom of Louis and Lothar and the kingdom of Charles were all split. This was the inheritance from the great-grandfather, well, not the great-grandfather, the grandfather, but the great Charlemagne. And here you can also see the partisans of the Carolingian Empire, how it was split, and how you can see the pink moves down here, and this is the great-grandson of Charlemagne fighting with his uncles, and eventually in the year 870 they agreed to rule in this manner. But imagine the Vikings here, how they would help and oppose and expand and exploit this situation here during the 9th century in the first dark age of the Viking Age. And that's a good point for me. Please don't forget about the Viking raids in France. Because, I mean, look at this, how much they traveled in on the rivers. And we got to understand the boats, the long ships, the warrior ships the Vikings had, they could easily travel in on rivers and just as easily disappear. It was like guerrilla warfare. And Charlemagne didn't really have any defense for it. Here we can see a report in the Frankish chronicles, actually, local sources, on a meeting with a Viking ship. It says here, insecure Frankish monarchy wanted to negotiate with the invading Viking army, and they asked them, can we speak with your leader, your lord? And they said, none, we have no lord, and we are all equal. And please remember this throughout this talk, because this is important in understanding the Germanic proto-democratic thing system and how they worked as tribes and the confederacies, as opposed to the absolute monarchy in the sense that Charlemagne tried to impose. And the next question was bluntly whether they would be subject to themselves to King Charles and accept his overlordship in return for receiving extensive landed property and power. And they said no, the Vikings said no, we do not wish to become subjects or accept grants from anyone at all. We prefer such gain as we can get for ourselves with our weapons and efforts. And as it says here from this book by Torgrim Titlestad, this brief and historical exchange of words recounts in a highly focused way the tale of two contrasting mentalities, that of the North as opposed to that of the South in Europe, to put it a bit bluntly, I guess. So you can imagine how this was exploited, but that's not how the Viking Age started. That's something that's important to know. Did you see I pointed out Verden here on the side here? The massacre of Verden was an event that happened in the year 782, when about 4,500 Saxons were beheaded, apparently in one day, and that's a lot of blood. This was just south of the Danish border, and the leader of the Saxons, this was during the Saxon Wars, the leader of the Saxons, Widukind, which means a child of the forest, he would escape and seek refuge among the Danes, which he quite often did. And also Charlemagne chopped down their tree. And the Vikings also, but the early Vikings, I mean pre-Christian Vikings, but all the Germanic tribes, they were had a very special relationship with trees, and especially the sacred tree. And the Saxons had their great Irminsul, which was chopped down by Charlemagne. And as it says here in the bottom on the right, Charles' aim was to crush the old Saxon social order. An independent Saxon regime represented a danger for the centralized government he wished to have. And in the 780s, he outlawed the Saxon thing system. Imagine what this did to the Danish and the Norwegians when Charlemagne traveled around and expanded his empire, and using this extensive sword christening, setting examples on the Saxons on what they could expect when the Danes, just a few years later when he planned to cross the Danish border. Well, it didn't happen. As you see on the right here, the Danish and the Norwegians and people from Scandinavia decided to use a sort of preemptive warfare. And once they found out how much wealth they could get from this, that changed the whole thing. And now we are touching on why the Viking Age started. After 782 and this horrible incident with all these Saxons losing their heads, the Danish started building this Danevirke, and that has a exact, I mean, this is sort of like a defense wall all across southern Denmark, at the time, southern Denmark. And you can see here a siege from Otto II, it says in this painting. But the Danevirke, that was actually started as early as the 730s. So here you can see how the Scandinavians knew very well what was going on outside of Scandinavia. They knew very well about the Saxon wars and how the Anglo-Saxons of England were very closely knitted into the Frankish Empire. And then we can move on with this guy. I mean, not Charlemagne, he's sitting there, but here you can see the monk Alcuin. It is he who wrote about the Vikings and who wanted retaliation against these horrible Vikings, who wanted to use this dangerous outside power of the pagans to, as it says here, I'll just read here. The attack on the Lindisfarne was presented as a punishment on a biblical model. Right? It was a punishment which particularly concerned the kings, with a clear reference to King Ethelred. And you can read for yourself here how it was written on these Viking attacks. And to the right here, from Bjørn Myhre, a very important Norwegian, he's passed away now, but he's a well-respected Norwegian authority on Vikings. He is clear on this point. It says here, Alcuin's letter cannot be taken in isolation from the churches, Charles the Great's, and the Anglo-Saxon king's political strategy. They all probably had a common interest in presenting the Scandinavians as terrifying barbarians who needed to be converted and conquered. And this is the depiction which still is taught in our schools of how the Vikings were. Even a couple of weeks ago, I was in having this conference, I guess, at the Explorers Club in New York. I was a moderator, and there were questions coming in, and there were people there wanting to compare the Vikings with ISIS as butchers and just crazy warriors. We should apologize for in almost like a sense, and it's so wrong. You know, we can call it a myth. Also, check this out. This is quite cool, actually. Alcuin had some knowledge of the Scandinavians, and he denounced his fellow countrymen for cutting their hair and beards like them. Is it not, he said in his sermon, is it not those people who threaten us, and yet you wish to imitate their style of hair? And why would you think that the local peasants in Northumbria, in Yorkshire, would take after the latest fashion of these Vikings? Well, they were quite fashionable, and they bathed every Saturday. And well, could it have something to do with the English women? I don't know. Why do you want to imitate fashion for some reason? It's quite telling, I would say. Also on the early contact that the Scandinavians had in England. And as we get on from Charlemagne and the way he worked in expanding his empire, he didn't have a clear answer towards Scandinavia. And once the Scandinavians started attacking Lindisfarne, that was just a warning, right? That was, and I'll tell you about Alcuin. He was born into a noble Anglo-Saxon family in Northumbria, and part of his inheritance was actually a monastery, and he was attending a very important cathedral school in York, very close to Lindisfarne, actually. And we got to understand how powerful Alcuin was. And Lindisfarne, this powerful and important monastery, also to Charlemagne, that was the monastery of Alcuin. So you see, it was a warning and sort of preemptive warfare, as mentioned. And that's when the Vikings found out. They came back with all this treasure. Then something happened, and we got to understand the Viking society the clan society before the Viking Age, up to the start of the Viking Age, it was so regulated. It was all, I mean, if you were a vassal, you remain a vassal for a lord or an earl or a king. And he was very regulated in terms of gift giving up and down. And if you had power, as the later Norwegian kings, like Olav the Holy and Harald Hardrade, when they came back so wealthy, they could just buy armies in a sense. And here you have in the start of the Viking Age, all these Viking ships coming out wanting to start attacking the Frankish Empire and sort of like destroying the Frankish Empire, like many of their relatives had done 3 centuries before, and they remembered surely very, very well and tell tales about it. We know this from the Norse sagas even, which were written down much later. A strong, orally oriented society, and especially the start of the Viking Age. And once all these Viking ships would go down and attack, Charlemagne didn't have anything to protect them himself or his empire from this, and certainly not his children and grandchildren who spend much time warring and attacking amongst themselves even. So you can see here in 885, this is sort of like a depiction of a siege of Paris, but the first siege of Paris in the year 845, that was pivotal in the sense that the amount of treasure, because we know how much, it was so much, it was crazy. And they became wealthy, and you can have poor people from poor fjords, but they had a Viking ship and they came back, and that turned upside down on the whole of society. And I think we can even see this genetically in the way that certainly you could become wealthy from not from the place you had in society, and that changed a lot of things. You had a lot of new wealthy people in the Viking Age, and this made for building more Viking ships. And even today, German historians have recently started looking at Viking Age and Vikings in a new sense, a more positive manner, because they, after some decades, all these cities, Cologne, Hamburg, Dorestad, which is attacked, I think, 20 times in about 25 years. So like a crop, you come back for every year, you know, but you don't destroy it totally. But Dorestad was an important trade city. And the way this went on changed actually the outline of all these cities, the archaeology in a sense, and the Vikings would be able to raid and transform actually many of these important cities from the Roman type of architecture until, well, a transformation into the Middle Ages. They expanded the city walls, moved the cemeteries inside of the city walls, and had, well, the outline that you can see in all the cities in Belgium and many other, in France and Germany and Netherlands and Luxembourg even. So yeah, that's how sort of this went on, and it's viewed in a more positive light. So please, I mean, we can talk about what happened in Ireland in the start of the Viking Age, but as you can see here from all the different years and numbers, this is later, once everyone knew how things would, well, they were part of destroying an empire. I want you to understand that. And there's a parallel here, and there are more parallels, I'll get to that, but there's a parallel here to the Roman Empire, which their ancestors had helped destroy. And as you can see here, with the great heathen army in the 860s, that's when they started to spend the winter even here in England, and done in Repton, by the way. There's the next big Viking paper on DNA that's coming out with a large mass burial grave with lots of not just men but women and children as well. That would be really interesting to see. It's coming very quickly. So you can see here how in the up to 814 how the Vikings would travel out and really conquer, in a sense, or help destroy this Frankish empire and their compatriots in Northumbria and Mercia. And so you can view this in either way you want. You can watch the first season of Vikings and say, oh, the Vikings here, they didn't know about England at all and didn't speak the same language. No, it's not right at all. So this is very important to know concerning how all the Vikings would venture out and what happened to them. And if you were wealthy and you came from a poor area, or you were from a poor family originally, or your father was, of course you would travel out, and you had this thing called primogeniture, where the first son inherits everything, but the other sons, they have to go out and venture on their own. This they didn't have in Francia. The Franks didn't have that. And that's how these countries, France and Italy and Germany, was shaped, basically, because of the three grandsons of Charlemagne. And you can see how it went, growing that immensely big, that Charlemagne wanted, and what happened afterwards. And there are some parallels here in history. We can look at not just the Carolingian Empire and Emperor Charles the Great versus the Germanic tribal societies. And in France, it's quite ironic that the proto-democratic Viking thing system, which also was all over Europe with the Germanic tribes, Northern Europe, turned into in Normandy as the concept of Norman law. And in the UK, after 1066 conqueror, William the Conqueror took England and replaced 92% of the Anglo-Saxon nobility with his own nobility. You had the Charter of Liberties, habeas corpus, and the all-important Magna Carta, which today still is a living law document. There is a parallel, as I mentioned, back to the 5th century, when the Germanic tribal societies were battling the Roman Empire, and Charlemagne, he was crowned Holy Roman Emperor. And he was the first Holy Roman Emperor, which also his one of his later descendants in Sicily, Frederick II, that I have talked about in the other video with the Normans in Sicily. He became Holy Roman Emperor, not because of his Norman ancestry on his mother's side. His grandfather was Roger II, but his paternal side with Frederick Barbarossa. There are more parallels here. The absolute monarchy that we knew about in the 17th and 18th centuries versus the age of revolutions. This is a similar concept where you have all these revolutions up until 1848 fighting against the absolute monarchy. And it's sort of like the same thing. And you can even say that maybe the European Union and the way it's deciding everything in detail, even here in Norway, even if we're outside of the European Union, it's quite special and horrific in a sense. So I hope this is of interest to you. I'll finish off now by just stating something from Torgrim Titlestad himself in this book in terms of what started the Viking Age. There's one principal reason. It's his, Charles the Great's, occupation and mass executions in Saxony with the assistance of the church in the name of Christendom. And if there was a sense of attacking Lindisfarne, the monastery, in 793, well, that was one of the key shrines of European Christendom. No less so for King Charles on the continent, and his principal interest lay in Mercia and Northumbria's significance for his political power through his alliances with the Anglo-Saxons. This is good and important to know. And as for what set up the Viking Age, the Viking Age was set off as a result of a conflict of civilization between the new centralizing monarchy under Charles the Great and the decentralized proto-democratic Germanic Iron Age societies which had remained outside the control of the Roman Empire and subsequently the Church until Charles the Great's most powerful ideological weapon was a church which converted at the point of the sword. And this was especially directed against the non-Christian Saxons. So there you have it. That's basically how the Viking Age started. And of course, it took off, as you now know. And if you didn't know this, and if you don't agree, that's okay. All right, we can disagree. We can agree on disagreeing. But there are several historians who have all these different theories on why the Viking Age started. I present this theory. I think it's very sound, very plausible, and the sources are very well written. You should check out this book in the links below. The website is in Norwegian only, unfortunately, but it's possible to order there. Now we're back to the what I started with some giveaways. I want to give away this Viking Legacy book. From the same author, Thorgrim Titlestad. I think it's very well written. And also, I've here it says Viking, I told you. I have also some other from the store here. Let's see if we can get this focus now. There we are. I'm not even going to say what this translates as, but these are Norse runes from Bergen in Norway about 800-900 years ago. And some of these are quite naughty. And you can go on in the shop links below and see what they mean. But there are also some quite cute ones also. My love, kiss me, and love me as you love yourself. I like that one. And I got this 2 t-shirts I want to give away, like this. On the back side it says Viking Stories, and here it says Viking. And if you leave, let's see now, I'll post this on Friday evening this week. So if you would like either the book or one of the 2 t-shirts, please leave a comment below. And I will read all the comments, and on Sunday I'll make an official announcement, and I'll send out these 3 things with a personal note. And I hope you check out the store also, because it's brand new, and I like this. This is fun. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you know some more about the Viking Age now. That's my intention. And this is actually part of the reason why I wanted to become a historian, learning about Thorgrim Titlestad and his view on the Viking Age, which has for the past 25 years caught on as more research has come out. Take care, and have a good day wherever you are.